of my favorite topics is around neuroplasticity and creating sustainable change and habit formation. Can you provide some insight into the best ways to create sustainable change in a business environment?
I love the conversation about neuroplasticity, Vannessa, because it really highlights how amazing the brain is. Everybody watching us speak here, their brains are actually changing shape as they're listening to us because they're learning new information, and that new information is going to change the shape of their brain because they're going to have neurons that are now connecting in ways that they've not connected before. And I find that really exciting, and it's really a wonderful thing for leaders to keep in mind because they can help their teams, their employees to make that change sustainable if they just set the environment up and the way they communicate with their staff well. Neuroplasticity is an amazing thing because the brain actually uses neuroplasticity to save energy. And I'll just explain that very briefly. The brain loves habits because when we form a habit, the brain doesn't have to think consciously about executing that behavior or that thought because now there's a neural pathway that's established. Now, there's a dark side to this, of course, because although the brain really loves making habits or loves having habits, it's not crazy about creating the habits because then it needs extra energy to create those habits. But we can make it easy for the brain by doing habit stacking and also just tweaking a habit that is already performed and just changing it slightly. So we're not using an enormous amount of energy. We are just tweaking that habit because it's important to keep in mind that we never actually ever overwrite a habit. The brain never does that. We now have to create a new neural pathway. And only by doing that thing consistently will we be able to get to the point where the brain naturally goes to that new habit versus the old habit. When we're stressed, we revert back to the old habit, especially if it's a very robust habit, because that uses less neural energy. So habit stacking is simply, I do this one thing every day. Let's just say I go to the certain coffee shop every day to get a coffee. And I don't want to start my day with coffee anymore, but I still want to go to the coffee shop. Now I'm going to have a green tea instead. It's got 50% less caffeine, but the habit of going to the coffee shop already exists. So I'm just slightly tweaking the habit, and I'm still doing something at the coffee shop at the same time, but now I'm doing something that serves me better. And we can do this with an enormous amount of habits. Just knowing that the brain wants to minimize the use of energy, but still likes a habit once it's been established. Leaders can use this when there's change happening in an organization, because if there's an enormous amount of change, the brain will naturally go no, and put on the brakes. When leaders understand that the brain doesn't like change, they can change behavior just by tweaking something. They can change behavior by adding something to something that's already being done. Also understanding how the change benefits you. So nobody wants to make a change that they think is only going to benefit the leader or the organization. They need to make that change knowing that it's going to benefit them too. And if we can give them a positive response or a positive emotion in relation to that change, we have a greater chance of that habit actually sticking, because we know emotion makes things easier to stick. That's why stories stick. And using that knowledge just makes it easier for the person to say, okay, this is actually going to work for me. It's also going to be serving me. So there's a few things to consider as a leader.
One of the things that you talked about, which is habit stacking, is really powerful. So I get a lot of my clients every time they go to the bathroom to get them to do a bit of mindfulness or to take that brain break and just increase the oxygen to their brain so it resets. So when they get back to their desk, they're refreshed and they can focus and pay attention to what's important next.